Sarah Martinez had always been smaller than her peers, standing barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, with a slight frame that made her look more like a college freshman than a military academy cadet. When she walked through the gates of the Marine Corps Officer Candidate School at Quantico, Virginia, the other candidates towered over her like redwood trees. Their muscular builds and confident strides made her feel invisible, which was exactly how she preferred it. The first day of training began before dawn with the harsh sound of drill instructors shouting commands. Sarah quickly learned that being small meant being an easy target for criticism. Gunnery Sergeant Williams, a mountain of a man with arms like steel cables, seemed to take particular pleasure in pointing out her physical limitations during the grueling obstacle courses and endurance runs. "Martinez, you move like a turtle in molasses," he would bellow as she struggled to keep pace with the longer-legged candidates. "This isn't summer camp." "Cadet." The other candidates began to whisper among themselves during brief rest periods. Some questioned whether someone her size belonged in the Marines at all. A few of the more vocal ones, led by a cocky candidate named Jake Thompson from Texas, made it clear they thought she was taking up a spot that should have gone to someone more physically imposing. "Look, nothing personal, Martinez," Thompson said one evening as they cleaned their gear. "But when I'm in combat, I want someone watching my back who can actually carry me if I go down. No offense, but you'd probably need help carrying your own pack, let alone mine." Sarah said nothing, simply continued cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. She had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words, and she was saving her voice for when it truly mattered. The physical challenges came relentlessly. The candidates faced 20-mile hikes with full packs, combat simulations that lasted for days without sleep, and obstacle courses designed to push human endurance to its limits. Sarah finished these exercises, but always near the back of the group, always struggling, always drawing the disappointed shakes of heads from the instructors. What the other candidates and even some instructors failed to notice was that Sarah never quit. While others dropped out during the first few weeks, complaining of injuries or simply unable to handle the mental pressure, she kept showing up every morning at 0500 hours, ready for whatever challenge awaited. During the academic portions of training, Sarah excelled in ways that surprised everyone. Her tactical knowledge was exceptional, and she demonstrated an uncanny ability to solve complex strategic problems that left even the instructors impressed. In map reading and navigation exercises, she consistently scored at the top of the class. Her written reports on military history and strategy earned praise from the academic staff. But physical prowess seemed to matter more in the eyes of most people around her. The whispers continued, and the doubt in people's faces grew more obvious as the weeks passed. Some instructors began treating her like a project case, someone they were trying to help succeed despite obvious limitations, rather than a serious candidate for Marine officer status. The breaking point came during a particularly brutal week of combat simulations. The candidates were divided into teams and thrown into realistic battlefield scenarios, using blank ammunition and advanced laser tag systems. Sarah's team was tasked with infiltrating an enemy compound and gathering intelligence while avoiding detection. Thompson, who had emerged as the unofficial leader of their group, made his feelings clear during the planning session. "Martinez, you stay back and provide communications support," he said dismissively. "Leave the real infiltration work to those of us built for it." Sarah felt a familiar fire kindle in her chest, the same determination that had carried her through every challenge in her life. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood in East Los Angeles, where being small and quiet often meant being overlooked or underestimated. Her father, a decorated Army veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, had taught her that true strength came from the mind and heart, not just muscle mass. "I understand your concern," Sarah replied calmly. "But I think I might have something to contribute to the infiltration itself." Thompson laughed, and a few other team members chuckled along. "Like what? You planning to crawl through a doggy door?" Instead of getting angry, Sarah pulled out the tactical map and spread it on the table. With a pencil, she began sketching additional details based on the reconnaissance photos they had been given. "The compound has 3 main entry points that everyone will be watching," she explained, her voice steady and confident. But if you look at the drainage system running underneath the eastern perimeter, there's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the old storm drain network. It's not marked on the standard maps, but you can see the entrance partially hidden by vegetation in this satellite image. The room fell quiet as the other candidates studied her analysis. Even Thompson leaned in closer, his skepticism wavering as he realized the thoroughness of her research. "The tunnel is small," Sarah continued, "probably too small for most of you to navigate effectively. But someone my size could move through it quickly and quietly, emerge inside the compound perimeter, and disable the security systems from within, while the rest of the team creates a diversion at the main gate." For the first time since arriving at Quantico, Sarah saw something other than doubt in her teammates' faces. There was a flicker of respect, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, her size might actually be an advantage in the right circumstances. The mission was scheduled for the following night. As Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, she knew this was her moment to prove that being underestimated could be the most powerful weapon of all. Tomorrow night, she would show everyone exactly what Shadow Viper was capable of, though she had no idea that call sign was already being whispered in certain classified circles far above her current pay grade. The compound exercise would be more than just another training scenario. It would be the moment when Sarah Martinez began her transformation from overlooked cadet to one of the most formidable Marines in the Corps. But first, she had to survive a mission that would test every skill she had developed and every ounce of determination she possessed. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to the small compass her father had given her when she left for Quantico. Tomorrow, she would find out if she truly had what it took to earn the respect she had been fighting for since day one. The night air was thick with humidity as Sarah's team prepared for their infiltration mission. The mock enemy compound sprawled across several acres of Virginia woodland, complete with guard towers, motion sensors, and roving patrols of instructor-played enemy forces. Red laser lights swept the perimeter, and the sound of boots on gravel echoed through the darkness. Sarah had spent the afternoon memorizing every detail of the drainage tunnel system. Using a small flashlight under her blanket, she had studied architectural drawings and calculated distances, timing, and entry points, while her teammates focused on their equipment checks and painted their faces with camouflage paint. Sarah prepared for a very different kind of mission. At 2,200 hours, the team moved out. Thompson led the main group toward the compound's eastern wall, where they would create a diversion exactly 12 minutes after Sarah's insertion. The plan was precise, dangerous, and relied entirely on Sarah's ability to navigate through spaces that would challenge even experienced tunnel rats from previous wars. Sarah split off from the group when they reached the tree line, carrying only a small pack with essential gear: night vision goggles, communication equipment, lock-picking tools, and a backup pistol loaded with training ammunition. Her movements were fluid and silent as she approached the drainage entrance, a concrete opening barely visible beneath a tangle of thorns and overgrown vegetation. The tunnel was even smaller than she had anticipated. The concrete walls were slick with moisture and decades of accumulated grime. Sarah had to crawl on her belly for the first 100 yards, pulling herself forward with her elbows while pushing her gear ahead of her. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of stagnant water, rust, and decay that made her eyes water. But she kept moving. This was exactly the kind of challenge her father had prepared her for during those long nights in their garage, where he had built obstacle courses and taught her the value of persistence over power. "Mija," he used to say, "the strongest person isn't always the one who can lift the most weight. Sometimes, it's the one who can keep going when everyone else stops." After what felt like hours but was actually only 18 minutes, Sarah reached the tunnel junction she had identified on the maps. A narrow vertical shaft led upward toward the compound's interior. She could hear voices above, 2 guards discussing their weekend plans while smoking cigarettes near what her intelligence suggested was the main security building. Sarah waited until their voices faded before beginning her ascent. The shaft was even tighter than the horizontal tunnel, forcing her to climb using a technique she had learned from rock climbing videos. pressing her back against one wall and her feet against the opposite side. Her muscles burned from the awkward position, but she moved steadily upward. The grate covering the shaft's exit was exactly where the blueprints indicated it would be. Through the metal slats, Sarah could see she was inside a utility room filled with electrical panels and monitoring equipment. More importantly, she could see the main security console that controlled the compound's perimeter defenses. Using tools her father had taught her to use during their weekend security consulting sessions, which she later realized were probably not entirely legal, Sarah carefully removed the grate from below. The process took 6 precious minutes, but she managed to lift it without making any noise that would alert nearby guards. Once inside the utility room, Sarah quickly oriented herself using the building layouts she had memorized. The security console was protected by a simple lock that yielded to her picks in under 90 seconds. As she worked on disabling the perimeter motion sensors, she could hear Thompson's team beginning their diversion outside. Explosions and shouting erupted from the eastern wall. Sarah smiled as she recognized the pattern. Thompson was executing the plan exactly as they had discussed, drawing all available guards toward the fake breach while she worked in the silent heart of their defenses. The security system was more sophisticated than expected, with multiple layers of backup protocols. But Sarah had spent countless hours studying electronic systems during her free time, driven by a curiosity that her instructors had noticed but never fully appreciated. Working quickly but methodically, she began shutting down sensors one by one, creating gaps in the compound's electronic net. As she worked, Sarah heard footsteps approaching the utility room. Her heart rate spiked, but her hands remained steady. She had perhaps 30 seconds before discovery, and the mission's success depended on completing her task. Instead of panicking, she accelerated her work, her fingers flying across the control panel with practiced precision. The door handle turned just as Sarah finished disabling the last sensor array. In one fluid motion, she rolled behind a large electrical transformer and drew her training pistol. 2 guards entered, flashlights sweeping the room as they investigated what they assumed was an electrical malfunction. Probably just another power fluctuation, one guard muttered. These old buildings are always having problems. Sarah remained motionless in the shadows, controlling her breathing the way her father had taught her during their hunting trips in the mountains outside Los Angeles. The guards spent several minutes checking various panels and switches, completely unaware that the compound's entire defensive grid had been systematically dismantled by someone hiding less than 6 feet away. When the guards finally left to investigate the ongoing commotion outside, Sarah emerged from her hiding spot and activated her communication device. "Shadow Actual. This is VIPER," she whispered into her headset, using call signs Thompson had assigned during planning. "Package delivered. All systems down. Execute Phase 2. Thompson's voice crackled back with obvious surprise and something that might have been respect. "Copy that, VIPER. Impressive work. Beginning assault. Now." What followed was a textbook infiltration that made the exercise instructors scramble to understand how their carefully designed defenses had been so completely compromised. Sarah's team moved through the compound like ghosts, gathering intelligence and completing objectives that should have been impossible given the security measures in place. Sarah remained in the utility room, serving as both overwatch and technical support. When enemy reinforcements tried to restore the security grid, she fed real-time information to her teammates, allowing them to avoid patrols and reach their targets undetected. Her small size allowed her to move through maintenance spaces and observe areas that larger operatives could never access. The mission concluded with complete success. Every objective was accomplished. Every piece of intelligence was gathered, and the entire team extracted without a single casualty or compromise. When the exercise ended and the lights came up, the instructors found themselves facing a group of candidates who had just executed one of the most flawless operations in the history of the training program. But the real surprise came during the debriefing session the next morning. Major Patricia Hayes, a decorated intelligence officer who had been observing the exercises, stood before the assembled candidates with an expression that mixed professional approval with genuine intrigue. "Ladies and gentlemen," Major Hayes began, Last night's exercise demonstrated several important principles of modern warfare. But one performance in particular has caught the attention of people far above my pay grade. Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. But for the first time since arriving at Quantico, the attention didn't feel hostile or dismissive. Thompson, sitting 2 rows behind her, leaned forward with obvious curiosity. "Cadet Martinez," Major Hayes continued, "your tactical analysis and execution last night were remarkable. But more than that, you demonstrated capabilities that certain specialized units have been looking for. I've been asked to inform you that your performance has been forwarded to some very interested parties." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. Specialized units? Interested parties? The phrases carried implications that excited and terrified her, in equal measure. Major Hayes concluded the debriefing with words that would echo in Sarah's mind for years to come. "Some of you will become excellent Marine officers. A few of you will become exceptional ones. And 1 or 2 of you might just become something else entirely." As the candidates filed out of the briefing room, Sarah noticed that several instructors were looking at her with new interest. The whispers had begun again, but now they carried a very different tone. Word was spreading that the small, quiet cadet from Los Angeles might be destined for something far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. 3 months had passed since the compound exercise, and Sarah's life at Quantico had transformed in ways she never could have anticipated. The whispers of doubt had been replaced by careful observation from instructors who seemed to be evaluating her for purposes beyond standard Marine officer training. Her physical scores had improved dramatically through specialized conditioning programs that appeared on her schedule without explanation. The changes began subtly. Sarah found herself assigned to advanced tactical courses that weren't part of the standard curriculum. Her marksmanship training moved from basic rifle proficiency to exotic weapons systems that most Marines would never encounter. She learned urban combat techniques, advanced surveillance methods, and infiltration skills that went far beyond what any normal officer candidate would need. Major Hayes became a regular presence in Sarah's training, observing her progress with the intensity of someone preparing a detailed report for higher authorities. During one particularly challenging exercise involving hostage rescue scenarios, the Major pulled Sarah aside for a conversation that would change everything. "Martinez, how much do you know about Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance?" Major Hayes asked, as they stood outside the tactical training facility. "Standard information, ma'am. Elite reconnaissance and special operations capability, direct action missions, deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines," Sarah replied, though she suspected this conversation was leading somewhere beyond textbook definitions. "What if I told you there were units that made force recon look like basic infantry?" Major Hayes asked, studying Sarah's reaction carefully. "Units that don't officially exist, that handle situations regular special operations forces can't touch?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. "I would say that sounds like something I couldn't be briefed on without proper clearance levels, ma'am." Major Hayes smiled for the first time since Sarah had known her. "Smart answer. The kind of answer that suggests you might be ready for some very interesting conversations." That evening, Sarah received orders to report to a building she had never seen before, located in a section of Quantico that required special access badges to enter. The facility was unmarked and heavily secured, with guards who checked her credentials 3 times before allowing her to proceed. Inside, she found herself in a conference room facing a panel of officers whose rank insignia and unit patches told stories of careers spent in the shadows of military operations. Colonel James Morrison, a lean man with gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance, spoke first. "Cadet Martinez, everything that happens in this room is classified at levels you don't yet have clearance to fully understand. What I can tell you is that certain people have been watching your development with great interest." Sarah remained at attention, though her mind was racing through implications and possibilities that seemed to belong in thriller novels rather than her actual life. "Your performance during recent exercises demonstrated skills that are exceptionally rare," continued Colonel Morrison. "The ability to think tactically under pressure, to exploit advantages that others overlook, to operate effectively in confined and dangerous environments. These are qualities that certain specialized units value very highly. Another officer, a woman wearing the subdued insignia of Army Special Operations, leaned forward. "Tell me, Martinez, what do you think makes an effective operator in situations where conventional military doctrine doesn't apply?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Ma'am, I think effectiveness comes from adaptability, from using whatever advantages you have, while negating the advantages your opponents think they have. Sometimes, the best weapon is being underestimated." The panel exchanged glances that suggested her answer had been exactly what they wanted to hear. Colonel Morrison consulted a thick folder before speaking again. "You've been selected for evaluation in a program that will determine whether you're suitable for assignment to units that handle America's most sensitive security challenges. The training will be unlike anything in conventional military experience. The missions, if you're selected, will involve threats that the public will never know existed." The weight of what she was hearing settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. This was the moment when her life would split between the path she had planned and something entirely beyond her imagination. "Before you decide whether to accept this opportunity," Colonel Morrison continued, "understand that success will require sacrifices that go far beyond what normal military service demands. Your identity, your relationships, your very existence may need to become fluid concepts. The people who excel in this environment often find that their old lives become increasingly distant memories." Sarah thought of her father, of his pride when she had called to tell him about graduating from officer candidate school. She thought of the neighborhood kids in East LA who looked up to her as proof that someone like them could make it in the military. Then she thought about the feeling she had experienced in that utility room. The sense of purpose that came from using her unique abilities to accomplish something impossible. "Colonel, what would my call sign be in this program?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the question. Colonel Morrison's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "That would depend on how you performed during selection." "Why do you ask?" "During the compound exercise, some of the candidates started calling me VIPER because of how I moved through those tunnels. I was wondering if that kind of thing carries forward." The Army Special Operations officer smiled slightly. "Call signs in our world are earned through performance in situations where failure means more than just a bad grade. If you prove worthy of one, it will reflect capabilities that go far beyond tunnel navigation." The meeting concluded with Sarah being given 48 hours to make her decision. She was handed a secure phone and told that when she was ready, she should call the number programmed into it and simply say whether she accepted or declined. For 2 days, Sarah wrestled with the choice. She walked the paths around Quantico, called her father, without mentioning the classified aspects of her situation, and imagined futures that branched in radically different directions from this single moment. On the evening of the second day, as she stood watching the sunset over the Potomac River, Sarah realized that her decision had been made long ago in a utility room where she had proven to herself that being small, quiet, and underestimated could be the most powerful combination imaginable. She pulled out the secure phone and dialed the number. When the voice answered, she spoke clearly and without hesitation. "This is Cadet Martinez. I accept." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and carried hints of approval. "Outstanding. Report to Building 447 at 0600 tomorrow. Bring only essential personal items. Your training begins immediately." As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that the whispers about her were about to take on an entirely new meaning. Soon, her name would be spoken in classified briefings and operational planning sessions that dealt with threats most people couldn't imagine. And somewhere in the near future, in a situation that would test every skill she had learned and every ounce of courage she possessed, a Marine would call out a name that would send chills down the spines of enemies who had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a small woman from East Los Angeles. "Shadow Viper, stand by." But that moment was still coming. For now, Sarah Martinez was simply a young woman who had chosen to walk through a door that would lead her into the deepest shadows of American military operations, where legends were born and heroes operated in complete anonymity. Tomorrow, her real training would begin, and she would start the transformation from overlooked cadet to one of the most feared operatives in the world. The compound exercise had been just the beginning. What lay ahead would test not just her physical abilities and tactical mind, but her very soul. And in the crucible of that testing, Shadow Viper would be born.